Yes,
Big one today.
indeed.
I can do a whole half-hour Bible study on this one.
Well, we'll
very
get
easily.
straight into it then. Today's question is, what is the abomination of the desolation?
Okay, the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. There are many, of course, who believe that the abomination of desolation was a sacrifice that was made by Antiochus Epiphanes, otherwise known as Antiochus who? Because nobody's ever heard of him.
I was just about to say that.
But they believe that it was a sacrifice where he sacrificed a pig on the altar in Jerusalem.
Ew.
And there are those who would argue that, except that Jesus contradicts it. They miss the point of what Jesus said. Because, of course, Antiochus Epiphanes lived a long time before Jesus. So let me wipe out the whole Antiochus Epiphanes thing with one verse real fast, okay?
Go on.
So this is Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, where Jesus says, when, notice that, future tense, when you shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those which are in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Okay, so the problem is this. If the abomination of desolation is still future according to Jesus, who clearly believes in the prophecy of the abomination of desolation by Daniel, then why do so many Christians try and put it in the past and say Antiochus Epiphanes fulfilled this?
That's a good question.
Okay, the reason is because there were a bunch of Jewish people who were very, very upset, as you can imagine, when a pig was sacrificed on their altar. And so they called it the abomination of desolation, and of course Christians came along and like, oh, that must be the truth. No. Jesus said that was not the truth. He made it very, very clear that that was not the truth. So we need to understand what is the abomination of desolation. So there are three ways of looking at this. There is the historical way, there is the prophetic way, and there is the symbolic way. Let's see how much of this we have time to cover in question time. Okay, so historically, this is what happened. The abomination of desolation is contrasted in the Bible. In fact, if we go to Daniel chapter 8, you can read the contrast there. The abomination of desolation is contrasted with the continual desolation, or correlated to, which symbolizes paganism. We're going to move fast. So paganism. So basically, what Jesus says: when you see paganism, stand in the holy place, then flee. It's that simple. The problem is, and Jesus here is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. That's the context of Matthew 24. The problem is that by the time the pagans, the Romans, had their gods inside the holy place of the temple, it was a bit late to flee because everybody was already dead. Like 1 million people had died by the time they got there. So that would make this prophecy a little bit pointless. So clearly, the prophecy is not talking about the holy place of the temple. What many people missed was that there was another holy place. And this is what we call the 2-mile exclusion zone around the city of Jerusalem. It was called the holy place. And it was the area in which no Gentiles were allowed to do any trade on the Sabbath day. So here's what Jesus in effect says. When you see the abomination of desolation, in other words, when you see the pagan gods standing in the holy place around Jerusalem, then flee. The problem is that how do you flee when the city has been laid siege to? How do you get out? And the answer is very simple. When you read the history, here's what happened. The Romans came and laid siege to Jerusalem. The Christians recognized the sign. It's now time to get out. They waited. The Romans left. The Christians left. They moved out. They moved the headquarters of their church. They moved everything away from the city of Jerusalem. And a number of years later, the Romans came back, laid siege to the city. 1 million people died, and not a single solitary Christian lost their life in the siege of Jerusalem because they followed the prophecy of Jesus Christ. Okay, so that's the historical application. However, anybody who has read Matthew 24 knows that there is more than just a historical application. Jesus is also talking about the signs of his return. And so this is where it gets way deeper again. It goes to another level. And so there is a prophetic aspect to what is taking place here. And here's what I'm thinking. Why don't we make this one a part 1 and a part 2?
Oh, wild cliffhangers.
a cliffhanger. Let's go over to Daniel chapter 8, because this is where the prophecy originally comes from. And we've got more time we can spend on this tomorrow, but this was a big question.
Okay.
So we've answered the historical application of it. Where's Daniel? Daniel's escaped from my Bible. Daniel, and let's read what it actually says in the book of Daniel, chapter 8, and verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking unto another saint, said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? Here you have the abomination or the transgression of desolation. What can that possibly be all about? That's what we're going to answer tomorrow as we get into tomorrow's question time.
Oh, thank you so much, Lyle. Of course, we're not really sure we're happy about the cliffhanger, but we'll tune in again tomorrow to hear the rest of our question of the day. What is the abomination of the desolation? Of course, if you have a question about the Bible or anything else, you can give us a call here at Faith FM. Our number is 1-800-324-843.